I did not want there to be any question of what we were going to talk about today, so I made sure that you would know. So at our house, we play this card game called Rich Man, Poor Man. And what the deal is with Rich Man, Poor Man, the way you play this game is, first of all, it's a strategy game, and it moves pretty quick. But the whole idea is to get rid of all the cards in your hand before everyone else. And that's the whole idea. And so if you do, then you are considered the rich man in the next round, and there's a reward. If you don't, or you're the last person holding a card, then you are considered the poor man in the next round, and there's a loss. And so if you're the rich man, there's a reward. If you're the poor man, there is a loss. Because here's what happens. The poor man has to take their best two cards, and before the next round starts, has to give those to the rich man. And it has to be the best two in your hand. That's the reward. And then the rich man gets to go first. The loss, if you're the poor man, is that the rich man can choose any two cards that he wants out of his hand, and they can be whatever he wants. It's not like a, hey, hold them up, you draw them. It's like, okay, I'm not going to need that, I'm not going to need that, and the poor man just gives the two cards away. So the rich man receives the best, the poor man receives the worst, all before the next round starts. And so as you can imagine, there's a lot of strategy you have to think about in this game. There's a lot of strategy involved. And so here's what I want you to know about the game is that strategic thinking leads to reward or consequence. So we're going to learn some things from this game over the next few weeks together. And so my primary goal for this series for us is I want us to stop thinking like a poor man. But I don't want us to stop just there. I also want us to start thinking like a rich man. And in order to do that, this is not about money, it's about mindset. And so let's begin our series today with our very first rich man money mindset. How does the rich man think? What's the strategy? And so here we go. Money can add meaning to your life, but money is not the meaning of life. And you go, okay, well, Shane, that's what I got up and came for. I already knew that. Yeah, I think you do too. But here's the problem. The problem is we may know what the rich man knows. We don't act like the rich man acts based on what we know. So I think you probably know that too. So today is about helping us change our mindset. So look, our money doesn't get much play at our funerals. I did a funeral yesterday, 2 days ago, and that just wasn't talked about. Money doesn't get much playtime at our funerals other than our relationship to how much of it we might have given away. I mean, money is a much better means than an end. In fact, if you make money an end, you may end up alone. But using money as a means to an end makes money meaningful. Now, this is a really important little statement that I'm about to make because it lands in all of our lives. And it's not a Christian thing. It's not a non-Christian thing. It's just like a thing, all right? So here goes. Being a means to an end is what makes anything meaningful. And that's true for you as well. If you want to live a meaningful life, and I know you do, you have to figure out how to become a means to an end that's not you. A means to an end that goes beyond you. And here's what we're going to discover. That when you decide to be a means to an end, your money becomes a means rather than an end. And you will begin to view all of your money and your resources and your net worth and view everything else not as an end, but as a tool to be used. So you may know this if you grew up around church, but if you didn't, let me just tell you. Jesus gave about 35 parables. And what these were, they were stories where he illustrated what the kingdom of God was like and what we're supposed to do and the things that we're supposed to do. And get this, out of these 30 plus parables, 16 of them had to do with money and possessions. But here's the interesting thing that may be a shocker to you. And it's probably a shocker because of the way that preachers talk about money. Jesus never asked for any. He talked about it all the time. Never asked for any, except for on one occasion when he asked someone if he could borrow a coin, and he did a little coin trick as best as we could tell. And then, again, the best as we could tell, he just gave the money back to him. And so what was he up to? What was all that about? I mean, if he didn't want our money, why all the talk about our money? And what we discover when we read the Gospels is when it comes to money, Jesus really was up to something. And he really was after something. But as it turns out, it wasn't anybody's money. This is exactly what Jesus taught in one of his, "Are you kidding me? Did he really say that?" stories. In fact, it was Luke, who was a first century doctor, who thoroughly investigated Jesus and records for us some of Jesus' parables. And in one of them, get this, one of these parables is about a rich man. And so Jesus tells this story to make a point about the rich man mindset. And so here we go. Get this. There was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So once upon a time, there was a rich man who had so much to manage that he couldn't manage it all himself. And so he hired a manager to do it for him. And the rich man caught wind that the manager was doing deals on the side, or maybe doing something that was dishonest, that made him nervous. So what did he do? He called him in. And he asked him, "What is this that I'm hearing about you? Word on the street is that you're not dealing with my stuff well. You're not being very accountable. You're not being honest, and you're not representing me well. And so here's what I want you to do. I want you to give an account of your management," meaning I want you to get all the books together. I want you to get your stuff, right? Get your books together, finish up whatever you're doing, because you cannot be my manager any longer. So he fires him. But before he lets him go, he says, "You're fired, but I need you to tidy up the loose ends. So I need you to bring me the big notebook, and then you're done." And so Jesus continues, and everybody's leaning in because Jesus is such a good storyteller. So the manager said to himself, "What shall I do?" It's like, "Oh no, I didn't see this coming. I've been caught." What? And so he says, "My master is taking away my job, and I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm too ashamed to beg. I've got pride." And suddenly he finds himself with little time and little opportunity to figure out where he's going to go, and if anybody would take him in. And so he thinks about it, and he comes up with this idea. And he says, "I know what I shall do. So that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses." So he comes up with this plan to make sure that when he's no longer employed very soon by this rich guy, that he has someplace to go and someone to go to. And so here's the plan he came up with. So he called in each one of his master's debtors, right? He calls in everybody who owes his master something. And he asks the first one, "How much do you owe my master?" 900 gallons of olive oil, he replied. And the manager told him, "Take your bill, sit down like right now, quickly, and make out a check for 450 gallons. Like quickly before anybody else finds out, because I don't have much time and I need to make sure I have somewhere to go and someone to go to." And so everybody in Jesus' audience has mixed emotions about this. Because if you're on the client side, you're thinking, "Wow, what a great deal. He got off with half. He only had to pay for half. That's great." But if you're on the rich man's side, you're thinking, "What a thief. No wonder he's letting him go." And so the client is like, "Done, writing the check right now. That's amazing. And oh, by the way, buddy, if you ever need anything, you call me." "Oh," the manager says, "Yeah, I might be doing that." And then he asks the second client, "And how much do you owe my master?" 1,000 bushels of wheat," he replied. He told him, take your bill and make out a check for 800. Just 800? Yeah, come on, let's do this right now. Wow, well, thank you very much. And hey, buddy, if you ever need anything, if there's anything I can ever do for you, you just let me know. Oh, well, don't you worry. You may be hearing from me sooner than you think. And the implication is that he did this over and over and over. And Jesus said he went to each one of the people who he had done business with his master and his master's money, and he settled all of these accounts at huge discounts. Now, in the story, when his boss, the rich man, finds out about this, everybody in Jesus' audience is going, oh man, this dude, he's not just fired, he's going to jail. In fact, in our day, we might execute somebody for doing this. He's done. And then Jesus, because he's a master storyteller and he knows how to get his first century audience to like lean in, and sometimes his 21st century audience to lean in, to be just confused enough to ask the question, what is Jesus trying to say in this story? Because in all of Jesus' parables, you need to know this, in all of his parables, there is someone who represents God and there is someone who represents the people in his audience. Every parable that Jesus ever told, there's someone who represents God and there's someone who represents you and me. And the people in Jesus' audience assumed that the dishonest money manager is about to be in really big trouble, but they would be wrong for assuming that. And if that's what you were thinking, like I was thinking the first time I read this, we would be wrong too. Because Jesus said, look what happened. The master, the rich man, commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. Like he complimented the guys like, hey, way to go, man. Whoa, you got me. I did not see that coming. You thought this through with a future in mind. And of course, Jesus' audience may be like you. And the first time, maybe if you're hearing this for the first time, might be a little bit confused like they were. It's like, wait a minute. Shouldn't he be in trouble for doing this? You're telling me that this rich man commended the dishonest money manager. I mean, like, what's going on with that? And so Jesus has them right where he wants them in his audience. And I think he's got us right where he wants us too. Because Jesus then pulls out of the story and teaches what he wants his audience to know about God's mindset about wealth and money and possessions, and how different it is than ours. And here's the lesson. This is the takeaway. The application of the story of this unjust, dishonest money manager. Jesus looks at his first century audience and he looks at us and he says this, for the people of this world. Now you got to know, he was talking to the Jewish people right there, but he's talking about the people who their lives are. When he says the people of this world, he's talking about people who live their life as if this life is all there is. Like there's a birth certificate, there's a death certificate, and what you see is what you get, and then it's over. The people of this world is what he's talking about. And then he says this, the people of this world are more shrewd, meaning that they think through things better in dealing with their own kind, more than the people of the light. And the people of the light he was talking about, again, he was talking to Jewish people who had an eternal promise that God was going to do something fabulous through that nation. And the people who have the covenants and promises of God, this is the Jewish nation. And sometimes he's saying, sometimes you have all this promise and you don't think through it as well as people that just assume that being born and dying is all there is to life. And that if there is a God, he's not really interested in my life. And then he expands this to those of us who have put our faith in Jesus and believe that there is life beyond this life. Like the people in the world often think through it better than those of us who are supposed to be thinking in eternal terms. Jesus' point is the reason this guy was commended. It's not because he was dishonest. He was commended because he took full advantage of his little time and his little opportunity. In fact, Jesus' point for you and Jesus' point for me is simply this. We are to do the same thing. That when it comes to your money, when it comes to your wealth, when it comes to our income, here is the question. We are to ask the question, how do I get maximum use out of my money in light of my little time and my little opportunity that come my way. And then, just so we don't miss it, Jesus leans in and he gets very, very specific. In fact, it's so specific that the first time I read this as an adult, it was like life-changing for me. Because Jesus now gives a command to those who claim to be Jesus followers. And so, look, if you don't claim to be Jesus follower, you don't call yourself a Christian, you don't have to do this. So please don't hear me telling you you have to do this. No authority to say that to you whatsoever. And if you're not a Jesus follower, you don't have to do this. So look, there are some takeaways that you could use, but you don't have to do this. But if you're a Jesus follower, Jesus leans in and here's what he says. He says, I tell you, in other words, pay attention now, because now I'm talking to you. I tell you, this isn't just a story. Jesus is about to give us a command. He says, I tell you to use, because it's a means to an end. I want you to use it. Money is not an end. It is a tool. I want you to use worldly wealth, to which we might be tempted to say, okay, sure. What other kind of wealth is there? Aha. Good question. In fact, if that's your question, you can tell you're really paying attention. Because like the manager, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself so that when it's gone, and hello, it is going to be gone one day, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings when it's gone. And the implications are that there's something we can do with our temporary wealth during this little slot of time that we call life that makes an eternal difference. And honestly, I'll just tell you, I would not take that seriously, and I don't think you ought to take that seriously at all, except for one thing. That after Jesus was crucified, he came back to life. And we say this all the time. If someone predicts their own death and resurrection and somehow pulls it off, I just think we should pay attention to what they say. And so Luke is writing this, and his point is clear about our money and our possessions, that money is a means, it's not an end. Money is a means to an end that goes beyond us and beyond this life. The implication is that our right now resources have the potential to make a forever difference. I mean, haven't you heard that your whole life? You can't take it with you. But there's a way for us to have something to show for it beyond this life. It's not a means to an end. Now, if Jesus is right, and I just want to go on record here today to tell you, I think he is. If Jesus is right, and I know this may be a little different, you may have to go home and go, okay, even if that's right, I don't even know I know what to do with that. But if he's right, and I think he is, it means that you and I, get this, you and I should view not a percentage of what you have as something that should be made available to your Heavenly Father. What it means is that we should view 100% of what we have as a potential means to an end. In other words, the question we should begin to ask as Jesus followers at some level is, how can I leverage more of what I have as a means to an end that's not me? That's outside of what benefits me. Because as most of you already know, because all of us have experienced just enough of this to know, that's where joy is found anyway. When Julie and I first got married, I'll own this. We had some advantages, and I didn't realize they were advantages at the time, but I look back and I realized they were advantages. And one of the advantages, we were both raised so closely alike. And one of the advantages we had is we were raised very similarly when it comes to money and money managing and generosity. And so consequently, when we set up our very first budget as a newly married couple, we decided up front that there was going to be a percentage of our money that was going to be given away first. And we just made the decision. And look, I've encouraged people to make this decision for years, and I don't think anybody really takes me seriously because it's a little bit complicated. But I've always said you should decide ahead of time what percentage of your income you're going to live on. And let me tell you why you should decide what percentage of your income you're going to live on. And I'll tell you, it's brilliant. What I'm about to say is brilliant. You're probably going to want to write it down. You ready? The reason you should decide ahead of time of what percentage of your income you want to live on is because you are going to live on a percentage of your income. Let me say that again because I know that's difficult, right? Why would you decide that? Well, because you're going to decide, you need to decide on a percentage of your income that you want to live on, and here's why. You're going to do it. You're going to live on a percentage of your income. Each of you. I don't even have to know you. I don't have to know anything about how you're living, but I know that you're living on a percentage of your income. Why would you not choose that percentage rather than letting a lifestyle choose it for you? Listen, that is shrewd thinking, forward thinking, rich man mindset thinking. You choose the percentage. The rich man, the rich man does not think about numbers of dollars. The rich man thinks about percentage. And so we just decided, no matter how much comes in, we're going to live on a percent, and then we're going to give a percent away. And so how do we use more of what comes our way, what sits in our bucket of resources to do things that are not simply for us? And the number of dollars is irrelevant. It's about pre-deciding ahead of time. Here's what the percentage that is going ahead of time, and we're going to decide here's what's going, and we're going to live on the rest. We're going to figure out a way to live on the other percentage. And here's the thing I know about you. All of you have several things that you factor into every one of your financial decisions. We all do. I mean, even if you don't have those things written down, I promise you, every time you make a financial decision, you factor something in. And so I want to suggest that you begin factoring this question in because this could possibly free you up to have the rich man mindset and be more of the kind of person you actually want to be anyway. And here's the question. Do I want more stuff or do I want more stories? And let me give you a hint at the answer. Like 2 days ago, nobody's going to talk about your stuff when you're gone. They're going to tell stories about you. Do you want more stuff or do you want more stories? Now, let me just say something real quick to several groups of you. Maybe you're in multiples of these. So what I'd like you to do today as you're leaving, well, you could do it right now, is I'd kind of like you to look around at the building that you're in. And for those of you who gave to make this building possible, I just want you to know that for the rest of your life, this building is a part of your story. And in a few months when our children's areas are renovated, you'll see something that if you gave to that last year, in the Simple Project, you will see something that for the rest of your life will be a part of your story. For those of you who gave on Christmas Eve to help families who were hurting or sick, forever, that is a part of your story. And those people that you helped will forever tell those stories about you. And I already know, here's what I already know, is that you don't know what you would have done with the money that you decided to give to make any of those things possible. Right? And you don't miss the money right now. But that building, every child that comes to faith, every mom that drags her teenage son in here, every husband that drags his wife in here and she's confronted with something that's life-changing, their story is your story for the rest of your life. So way to go. I hope you never lose sight of that. I mean, how do you compare the stuff with the stories? And come on, look, I get it. We all have to make a living. We all have bills to pay. I get it. We got to get our kids through school. I really get that. I'm not advocating for irresponsible living. I'm just thinking, I think you should factor this in. What do you want? More stuff or more stories. Now, Jesus' point is simply this, that money can add meaning to your life when you use it as a means to an end beyond you. But look, the story isn't over, and so I'm going to get you through the last part really quickly because it's fascinating. It's fascinating. Everybody's leaning in. And then Jesus says this, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And they're like, wait, what? Yeah, okay. And then whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with very much. Okay, all right, well, wait. What are you talking about? He keeps going. So he says, I'll tell you, if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who's going to trust you with true riches? Okay, Jesus, what is your point? And Jesus' point was simply this, that no matter how much you have, and no matter where you think it ultimately came from, your money is not only a means to an end, it is also all a test. It's like the manager in the story. We all have a little bit of money for a short amount of time, and we are all basically being tested to determine whose kingdom are we devoted to. My kingdom or the kingdom that goes beyond our personal lives? And again, it's strange. Maybe from your perspective, that might actually be creepy from a guy in a money suit. But apart from the resurrection of Jesus, no one should even take that seriously. But it was Jesus who was resurrected, and he wraps it up like this. He says, if you've not been trustworthy with someone else's property, it's like, wait, what? Wait a minute. Someone else's property? I'm not a manager. This is my stuff. I'm not managing this for someone else. I mean, this is my paycheck. This is my money. I have the deed to my house. This is my house. I bought it with what I worked for. I have the title to the car. That's my car. I mean, come on. I own stuff. It's my stuff. And he says, if you've not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? Because Jesus is saying, your money is still going to be here when you're gone. You know that, right? And the moment you think you own that, it owns you. Because like the manager in the story, we are all, in fact, managers. We are not owners. You say, oh, I'm an owner. Do you know the way to know that you're not an owner? Is that it's like the company you work for, that if you walk in tomorrow and they let you go, you leave and you leave all that stuff there, you don't take it with you. You might carry out your little bitty box, but you leave that there. You were just managing something. We all know that we're not owners if we're going to leave it behind, because when you leave and it stays, like is going to happen to all of us, clearly you didn't own it. You were just managing it. So what do we do with all this? Some of you are like, all right, there you are up in there in that suit and a microphone. You're just trying to get to our money, aren't you? Draw your own conclusions. But for those of you who are Jesus followers, and you've already settled this issue that there is more to this life than this life, for those of you who wrestle with this because you hate the greed that sometimes bubbles up inside of you, sometimes you hate that resistance that you feel that when there's an opportunity to lean out and help and to do more, your heart and everything in you is saying, yes, I want to do that. And as soon as you get your phone out to do that, it's like you put one less zero on there than you originally thought because you have that struggle. I mean, where do we start? I think the real place to start is the place that Jesus is pointing to. And the place is not an amount of money. It isn't really even a percentage. The place to start is with the big question that most people never stop to ask. And if you don't ask the question, then you're never going to have an answer to the question. A question that on the surface seems to have nothing to do with money, but in the end, it has everything to do with money. And so here's the question I want to leave you with. That if being a means to an end is what gives life meaning and purpose, To what ends do you want your life to be a means to? And I've asked these kinds of questions around here for a long time. Like, what do you want people to celebrate about you when you're gone? Like, what breaks your heart that you're actually doing something about, you're not just complaining about? What would you want people to line up at your funeral and say and maybe thank you for at the end of your life? And my friends, look, if you don't answer those questions, your appetites will eat up all of your resources. And if you don't answer those questions, your appetites will dictate an answer for you. Do you know what the answer to those questions aren't? Well, here's what it is for me. It's accumulation, it's consumption, it's upgrades, it's fashion all through my house full of stuff. That's the meaning of life. Nobody chooses all of that on purpose. But if you don't decide to the ends to which you want your life to be a means, that is the direction that our culture will pull you. She ate, she drank, she was merry, and then she died, right? That's not a legacy. That's a life poorly lived. That is a poor man mindset. And here's the thing, and then we're done. When you answer the big question, and you start wrapping your heart around the answer to this big question, your money will begin to follow because money is a means to an end. But listen. Until you answer the big question, you may just end up following your money, and that would be a shame to live that way. And so this week, here's the question I want you to wrestle with. If being a means to an end is what gives life meaning, to what ends do I want my life to be a means? And when you identify and embrace the answer to that question, your money will begin to follow, and you will begin to view everything you own, everything that comes your way, as a means to an end as it was intended to be. So the rich man mindset shift, number one, is money can add meaning to your life, but money is not the meaning of life. So at the end of this teaching, something really interesting happens. Jesus is telling this to his audience, and they're all in it. He's telling it to his disciples, and they're leaning in. But as we find out from Luke, there was another group of people listening. Luke tells us, here's what he says. The religious leaders, the preachers down at the temple, the Pharisees, who loved money, heard all of this and were sneering at Jesus. And do you know what their names were? Yeah, me either. So let's get this right. And we'll pick it right up there next week. Father, thank you for your teaching on how we can see things from your perspective. And so, Father, there's some of us that have some work to do. In fact, I think probably all of us have a little work to do about how we see what we have, how we see ourselves in what we have, and ultimately what we do. And so, God, would you challenge our motives? Would you challenge our mindset? And God, would you help us not to live with the poor man mindset, but to transition over these weeks to come to see money the way you see money, and to allow our hearts and our heads to transition into the rich man mindset on money. And we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.